Before I get started, I think I have to tell this story because if I don't, my head will explode and I won't be able to not think of this story before I get started. So it has to do with the room. And so I kind of feel like today's going to be the best presentation ever in the history of mankind. Do you feel that at all? Yeah, do you feel it? Okay, good. As long as you feel that. Part of the reason is I think the way the room is set up really sort of sets us up to be successful. So a couple weeks ago, I'm teaching a class where I work. And I walk into the room, and they tell me the class starts at 8 o'clock, and it's all field supervisors. And probably lots of you in this room have taught a class with all field supervisors. Generally, they sit in the room, cross their arms, and kind of dare you to teach them something. Actually, you're doing it right there. That's the look. Like, I'm in this room, they're paying me, but I'm not going to learn anything like that, right? So I get to the room, the class starts at 8, and I roll in about 7:56. So near as I can tell you guys, that's 4 minutes early by any court of law, okay? So I'm in time. And I walk into the room, and it's set up in round tables like this. Now, at my place, we never set up a training class in round tables. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And I think, should I reset the room? No, it's not worth it. I'll just leave the round tables up. But the weird thing is there's nobody in the room. The room's completely empty. Now, if you do a lot of training, that's like your best fantasy. Like what I dream about is teaching a class where no one shows up. That'd be the perfect day, right? But I think, I guess I should wait a bit because I don't really want to start because there's no one in the room. And so I sit in the corner and wait, and sure enough, in 10 minutes, people start coming in. And what they'd done is they'd used psychology to trick me. They told me the class started at 8 when in fact it started at 8:30. And the first two guys come in the room, and they come in the back door, and I'm sitting in the corner. I don't think they can see me. And the two guys walk in the room, and one guy turns to the guy next to him, and he goes, "Crap, round tables." Just like that. Well, now I'm kind of interested, right? And his friend says, "What's the problem?" And he says, "I hate round tables." And his friend said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it means at some point during this presentation, they're going to make us touch each other." I made them touch each other. I mean, I just feel like I need to sort of build into that. So can I set the tone for today, although I'm not sure I can do a better job than what the guys did up front. I'll watch videotapes of AEDs saving lives. You can show me those all day long. I mean, that's how important the work we do is around this notion of capacity. But I want to set the tone with a relatively new theme slide. And I think you're the perfect crowd to actually show this slide to. Because the other day, I was flying to go give a presentation and had to transfer from the big plane to the little plane. You know what I mean? So I flew in a big plane, and everything was really comfortable. And then I walked through the bowels of the airport, down a bunch of weird hallways and some steps, and they put me into like one of those little tiny planes, like those air toothpick planes. You fly these? Like it's the kind of plane, like if you ever have to go to Kearney, Nebraska, and why is an entirely different presentation. You're going to be on a little air toothpick plane. Like, you know these planes, right? It's when you're sitting in the plane, and there's like 4 people up here, and I'm on one side, and the flight attendant comes in and says, "We'll need to get 4 of you to move to the back row." Or then they turn to me and say, "Or, sir, you could move." One of those planes, right? So I walk all the way down there, and I'm going up these little steps, and as I walk on, I got my little man purse with me. It's European, so I feel pretty secure about it, right? And I'm walking to get on the plane, and they say, "I'm sorry, sir, this plane has no overhead. You'll have to put your bag underneath." So I did. I mean, I didn't feel like it was a choice. And I got on the plane, and I nestled into the seat, super comfortable. I mean, you can imagine, right? And we get ready to take off. They fire up the engines. We taxi down this jetway. We're about to take off, and I realize, holy crap on a cracker, I don't have anything to look at. I put my phone in my European man bag, and my European man bag is now underneath the plane, and I'm going to have to sit for 1 entire hour with no external stimulus. And then I think, relax, you can do this. It's doable. And we take off, and it's not doable, you guys. I'm starting to go crazy. And I look, and the seat pocket, which is about an inch away from me, there's nothing in the seat pocket. And I think, holy cow, I got nothing to do. I'm going to literally go insane inside this plane. And I start looking, and the seat next to me, there's a lady sitting in it, but I see a magazine pointing out the top of the back of the seat pocket. And I think, I don't think she's using it, and that at least give me something to do. So I kind of reach over and sort of casually, and I think quite coolly, ask her, can I borrow the magazine that's in the seat pocket in front of you? And she says, certainly, it's not mine, you can have it. And she pulls it out, and she hands me a magazine, and I open it up, and the magazine is called The Lancet. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's really a horrible magazine. It's the British medical journal. And so I think, well, this isn't all going to be a loss, because if I look long enough, there's probably going to be a picture of some gaping wound or some creepy birth defect. I mean, it's probably going to be worth it, right? I start thumbing through it, and there's nothing at all that even looks close to a picture. But I still go all the way through until I find this headline. That kind of freaked me out a little. But now I got like 54 minutes left. So I start to run some quick calculations on the back of a napkin. I am a medical miracle. Just in case you're wondering, I've outlived my bacon quota about as much as I can. That sets the theme for what we're going to talk about this morning. Because I can't be more pleased than I am right now to be asked back. Nobody asked me back. I don't know what's wrong with you guys. I mean, if you lived through last year, usually that's sufficient. Usually they say, never bring him back again. But something must have screwed up. I don't know what happened. And so to give you my presentation, and really to bridge on exactly what Matt talked about, I want to tell you guys a story. But to tell you this story, I actually have to tell 2 other stories. So this is a 3-story story. Now, some of you are not going to be comfortable with that. Others of you, a lot of you in this room are 6-story people. I mean, this is nothing for you. But some of you are going to be kind of freaked out. Here's the deal I'll make with you. The only story I care about is the 3rd one. If you need a little time to sort of envision how much fun you had last night, I think I got that. That was a contest, right? You had to go to each one of those buffets and eat as much as you could before you could go to the next one. Do I have that right? You're looking at me like I don't have any mirrors in my house. Do I look okay? You know I'm wearing my hair different, right? Yeah, I got it parted on the other side today. I mean, I'm just kind of mixing it up, right? If you want to fantasize about how good last night was, the first 2 stories are a good place to do that. For the rest of you, just kind of hold on because you need to get there. And the story I want to tell you is really a story about this safety that we manage in the organization in which I spent 27 years. Because at my organization, Los Alamos, when we're good at safety, we're really good at safety. When we suck at it, we're really good at sucking at it. I mean, and that's part of kind of the stage I want to set for you guys. And so to tell you that, let me go to story 1. So story 1 involves the place where I work, Los Alamos. And what's interesting is that it's on about 44 square miles. If you haven't been there, it's on a series of mesas that kind of look like a hand. So there's 5 mesas that stick out. And if you want to know which mesa I worked on, it's this one. I don't know how to point that out to you other than do it this way. It seems kind of offensive, right? And one of the things we have, because we're a part of the Manhattan Project, so there's a lot of legacy issues that exist at Los Alamos, is we have a whole series of water wells that are located all throughout the facility, and we test those wells for environmental reasons. And one of our wells fell off our list, and the regulator discovered it. And in fact, if you want me to explain how it happened, we had a sheet of about 60 wells that we tested with great regularity. And the weirdest thing, you guys, the bottom well, because of variability in copy machines, over time, sort of fell off that list. And the regulator discovered it. And they said, you're trying to sneak one by. And we said, oh, no, this is genuinely a mistake. This isn't something purposeful. They said, you need to get on this well and you need to look at it as aggressively as you can. It's been 10 years since you've actually put in any information on this well. So we got a problem, we got to solve it, and there's kind of a lot of heat on us. So my boss calls me and says, let's get that well in the loop today. And I say, okay, before we run our environmental people out there to test it, why don't we send some safety people out there to kind of check it out to make sure it's okay? And so we sent some people out to check the well, and they came back a couple hours later and they said, it looks marvelous. There's only one little problem. And I said, what's the problem? And the guy looked at me in the eye and he said, the road getting down to that well looks like we haven't driven on it in 10 years. And I said, well, that's probably about right. It's been about 10 years. They said, we ought to probably look at that road and fix it before we send people out there. So we called our very best road guy. You know, the guy that's really good at it, doesn't ask a lot of questions, just gets stuff done. And he said, absolutely. He said, it's a priority. I'll get on it. And he said, I'll get it started tomorrow, and I'll go out and scope the job and come back and tell you what it's going to take. And he calls back, and he says, it's going to be a 2-day deal. We're going to run 1.25 inches of base course out there. We'll run some dump trucks out on the system. We'll get out there. We'll smooth that. It's going to be perfect. It's about 1.25 miles of a road. Everything's going to be fine. So the next morning, they bring a crew out, and they do a pre-job on that work. Now, I don't know what you guys in this room think about when you think about pre-jobs, but I'd actually suggest to you that pre-jobs over time have drifted to almost kind of an administrative burden. And that's kind of sad in a way, because I would actually suggest pre-jobs are really valuable in their ability to build capacity. The reason we plan is to micro-simulate the work we're going to do so we can identify some potential problems. And these guys did a pre-job. They didn't get too lost in the administrative crap. They just sort of looked at it and they said, this is going to be an easy job. Probably a day, day and a half. No big issues except for one. About 1 mile into that road from the blacktop highway to where the well is, power line crosses the road really low. And the reason it crosses the road really low is that power line's going in to actually give power to that well. That's really the only hazard we have. It's an overhead hazard. We're going to take care of that. So they tell the guys, get started. And while you're getting started up here at the top of the road, we'll send a couple people down to the bottom of the road, and they're going to mark the line. They're going to flag the line. And because it's a new line, they're going to paint a really, really bright orange stripe on the road so everybody knows where that power line is. And everybody says, great, and they go to work. And they got 3 little dump trucks full of gravel from the gravel yard. And the first dump truck comes in, and the guy driving the dump truck's brand new to the company. In fact, nobody really knew him. And when he sat behind the wheel of that dump truck and started hitting that hydraulic lift on that dump, angels started to sing. And grown men began to cry. And the air smelled like chocolate chip cookies. You know what I mean? He was one of those guys, and you guys not only know these guys, you can name these guys, who was just masterful at heavy equipment. And if you've ever seen a guy that is just really, really good with a backhoe or really good with a dozer, it's kind of miraculous. It's more art than science, and they just have a feel for it, right? And he starts dumping gravel, and sure enough, you guys, he can dump gravel at 1.5 inches just as smooth as a baby's behind. And somebody says, this guy's good. Where'd we get him, right? Let's keep him on the dump truck, and instead of rotating truck and driver, let's just rotate trucks and put this guy on the job. Less moving gravel around, less compacting, less shoveling. This guy's the dude. And so that's what they do, and it works beautifully. And a job that was going to take them 2 days suddenly looks like it's going to be done around half day. The problem is the guys that are supposed to mark that little power line, they haven't gotten down there yet to flag it or put the signs up. And so what happens, as you can imagine, is pretty soon, Dream Boy, the dump truck driver, is going down a hill, and he's at the end of the load, and he's a mile into the system. Now, if you're going down a hill and you're at the end of the load of the dump truck, where's the bed of that truck? Yeah, in fact, it's all the way. In fact, if you could get it up higher, you'd probably get it up higher. He's got that baby maxed out, and he's paying a lot of attention to that 1.5 inches of gravel because that's how you get good at it. And as he pulls under there, the top corner of that dump truck snags that power line, and all hell breaks loose. Nothing happens. It was no big deal at all, except that it's a precursor to an electrical safety event. And at our facility, electrical safety events are priority learning opportunities for us. And so they stop the job, which is exactly what we want them to do. And they notify us that they've had an event that we can learn from. And so we send a couple guys, in fact, the same 2 guys that went out and did the first overview that said fix the road, I sent those 2 guys because they already knew the way, so it was pretty easy to get them out there. And they zoom out there to start a little critique. They're going to look at the event, but by the time they get there, the contractor had run off the dump truck driver, he'd run off the supervisor of the job, and he'd run off the spotter that was doing the work. So when my guys get out there, there's not a lot of people to talk to because the people who actually had the event, for some reason, they're gone. And so the discussion really became a discussion around this notion of awareness. And we came back and we wrote a report and we submitted the report up to the top. And the guys at the top, you know, the guys in the good shoes, those guys, they decide this is a precursor indicator and that they needed to react pretty aggressively. So here's what they did. Now you tell me if this wouldn't happen to you guys. They decide that the best way to increase awareness of the potential hazard of overhead objects is to have a stand down. I don't know how you feel about stand downs, but they're a pretty aggressive intervention, and this one was going to be nothing short of an amazing stand down. So they determined that what they were going to do is the following Wednesday, they were going to stand down all driving operations in our facility and bring everybody who drives a truck into an auditorium. And they were going to get a bunch of people to give presentations, and they were going to hire a consultant who's an expert in not hitting crap at the top of your truck, and they're going to bring him in as kind of the keynote, don't hit crap at the top of the truck guy. So they bring everybody into this room. You can imagine what it looks like. All these people who don't really sit down all day long are now in an auditorium. And a bunch of people with a bunch of slides get up and tell them the same thing. Stop hitting crap at the top of your truck. Good drivers don't hit crap with the top of their truck because good drivers are constantly at crap awareness level 10, and they're constantly monitoring the crap that could possibly hit the top of their truck, and they are super aware. And then they bring the guy in from out of town. He's got movies of people hitting crap at the top of the truck, and he really tells them how valuable it is to not hit crap at the top of your truck. And then they think, well, that's probably not enough because that stand down is meaningful, but what really, really helps people be safer are stickers. I don't know how you feel about stickers, but we need some damn stickers. So they bought a bunch of stickers, and basically the stickers say, don't hit crap at the top of your truck. I mean, the theme doesn't really change. But they decide these stickers would be even better if they identified the maximum height of each vehicle. So on the dashboard of every single truck, while they're in there at the love fest, the not hitting crap at the top of their truck meeting, they're putting stickers out there on the dashboard that says, don't hit crap at the top of your truck is 12 feet tall. And then they had everybody sign a roll sheet, and they had everybody kind of smile, and then they told them at 4 o'clock, go home. And that is story one. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Probably the best job ever telling story one. which leads me to story 2. About 2 weeks after story 1, the guys who work in our warehouse came to work on a Monday morning. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about the driving culture at Los Alamos National Laboratory, but the guy who's in charge of our warehouse is an amazing leader, and everyone loves him. And he's done something pretty remarkable, and that is he's developed an arc for drivers. And here's how it works. If you come to work for us as a driver, you're going to start at the garbage truck. That's kind of the entry zone, the garbage truck, which I think is a pretty sexy job. I like a job that if you do a really good job on Monday, Tuesday, you still get an opportunity to do a really good job. Garbage doesn't go away. If job security is important for you, either that or the porta potty guy, you're going to work forever, right? If you're a really good garbage truck driver, you can advance to the recycling truck guy. And the recycling truck guys, that's a little advanced, little cleaner, little neater. They spend a lot of time inside buildings, so they're pretty valuable. If you're really good at recycling, you get to drive the warehouse truck. Now you're up there at pretty high levels. If you're really good at the warehouse truck, you get to drive the big science trucks. That's where you got like the death laser or alien bodies. I mean, you're carrying pretty interesting stuff, right? And if you're really good at the science truck, the top of the pyramid is laboratory cab driver. And what's amazing is he's been doing this for years, and you can kind of follow these drivers through the organization. He develops people, and he develops people in a way that they arc, and they just get better at it. And he's really good at it. And that Monday, he does something that he's been doing for years, which is he does a weekly briefing. But he's really interesting because he doesn't really talk about safety. And I kind of think that's a topic we should broach too, because I don't think this meeting is about being safe. Because I actually don't think you guys have a problem with being safe. In fact, I will tell you, because I'm from the outside, for what you do, you're world class. You really are. This meeting is not about being safe. This meeting is about being safer. And that's what this guy figured out. And what he said is, what I'm going to focus on is reliability. Because if we're reliable, we're safe, our quality's good, our environmental signature's small. I want to wrap all those operational things into one angle, and I want to sort of manage that by saying, the thing we do better than anybody else is we reliably perform our function. Every time we do our job, what we want to have happen, happens. And he was doing that morning meeting, and it went beautifully. And then he assigned people on their jobs. So the trash guys went out and got in the trash truck, and the recycle guys go out to get in the recycling trucks. Now, we have 3 recycling trucks, 2 12-foot box trucks. Let me say that again, that's going to be important. 12-foot box trucks and 1 10-foot box truck. Now, the 10-foot box truck is kind of the sports car of picking up recycling. That's the one that goes around our main administration building, and so that one's smaller and a little bit more agile. And the first 2 guys get in the 12-foot box truck, and it's fine, good to go, and they take off. Second 2 guys get in the second 12-foot box truck, and it's fine, good to go, and they take off. The third 2 guys get in the 10-foot box truck, and when they open the doors, they notice something really significant. What they notice is a family of mice have moved from their summer home to their winter home inside the truck. Okay? So the guys stop work. Now, I don't want you to sit there and think that they're a bunch of wusses that are scared of mice. They're not. What they're really, really highly trained in is something called the hantavirus. Do you guys know the hantavirus? About half of you in this room should know it, right? And so what do we know about the hantavirus? It's a respiratory illness that often leads to death, and the way you get it is with aerosolized mouse urine, which if you look in the Cabela's catalog, I'm relatively certain you can buy it. It's between deer and monkey. Did I get that right? Did they make you sit alone? Are you in trouble? Okay, just checking, right? So because they see these mice, they back away, which is exactly what we've told them to do, and they notify the rodent control people who are going to come get rid of the mice. But what they're really going to do is clean up the inside of the truck for the biohazard. So they come back into the shop and they say, 10-foot box truck's got mice in it. The supervisor says, crap. grabs a walkie-talkie and calls out to the drivers and says, 10-foot box truck has mice in it, check your truck now. And everybody calls back and says, we're good, we're good, we're good, we're good. And he says, well, let's be aware of this mice problem. And he says, the 10-foot box truck is out of service today. Then he says to the 12-foot guys, if you get a chance and you got some time, swing by the main administration building and pick up the recycling so we have a presence at the head shed, right? So they call back and say, no problem. And the whole day goes perfectly. And one of those 12-foot box trucks is coming back to the warehouse. And as they come back to the warehouse, they drive by our main administrative building. And they think, okay, we got some time, we got some space, we'll just swing in and pick up the recycling. So they pull to the main administration building, and as they pull to the back dock, they realize that the back parking lot has been closed because there was a water main leak that weekend, and they actually had excavated it, and they were replacing this water main, and so the back dock, back parking lot is closed. These guys are off their normal route anyway, so they think, well, we'll just go to the front. Have any of you guys ever been to Los Alamos National Laboratory? Yeah? So it's a really interesting place. And our main administrative building is worth talking about just for a moment. It was built by a committee of physicists and then constructed by the Army. To say that building is ugly would be kind of a compliment. It's serviceable. You know what I mean? Serviceable. Like, remember in high school? Sometimes people dated you because you were serviceable. Do you know what I mean? Right? And the building really over time has not fared pretty well. And so a decision was made a couple years ago that we needed to really focus our attention on that building because it's kind of the main impression you get of the facility. And so some genius said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to paint that building brown. Now, I don't know if you know this, but if you have an ugly building and you paint it brown, you know what the result is? Yeah, a brown, ugly building, very good, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, it's where all the big bosses sit. And so over time, that building has kind of drifted from what was once called the administrative building to now what everybody pretty much calls the Brown Palace, which has a tremendous amount of jokes in there that I'm not going to go with, but I mean, we can maybe get them a break. And the whole paint scheme didn't work very well. So somebody said, what we ought to do is put a really fancy pants Hampton Inn style awning on the front of the building. Because that makes everything, I mean, you guys think about all the Hampton Inns you've been in. It's the awning that makes that place classy, okay? So they build this really nice awning on the front of it, and they're pretty proud of it. I mean, kind of weirdly proud of it, right? And so the 12-foot box truck guys, since the back parking lot's closed, they think we'll just go around to the front. So they drive down the side of the Brown Palace, and then they turn to go into the Brown Palace, and they're heading right for this brand new Hampton Inn style awning. And on that awning is a picture, a sign that says 12-foot clearance, okay? And in their truck is a brand new sticker, still kind of smells like plastic, that says 12-foot truck. 12-foot clearance, 12-foot truck. Want me to say it again? I'm seeing if you're vibing on it. 12-foot clearance, 12-foot truck. What would you do? Did you say go faster? Let me give you a hug. Get up here. Come on, baby. Go faster. I'll work with you anyway. You're a good hugger, too. Go faster. What would you do? Talk to me. What would you do? So you'd stop the job. Really? I feel like you're lying a little. Are you? I mean, it sounds like the right thing to say with all these people in the room. Let me introduce an idea to you that I think you guys are masters at. I don't know if you call it this, but I want you to think about it. And the idea is called operational ambiguity. And what your guys do all day long, every day, is disambiguate things that on paper look incredibly clear, but in reality lack that clarity that you need in order to make good decisions. Because I'll just say this to you guys. I mean, I don't know what you're thinking, but had that sign said 11 foot 11 inches, this story would not be told. But because it says 12 foot, and because we know the truck is 12 foot high, because they've just been to the training where you don't hit crap at the top of your truck, I would suggest those two signs together are as much a green light as they are a red light. You think I'm wrong? And then the story gets interesting. Because here's what happens next. There's two guys in this truck. There's a driver and a helper. And so you can probably write what's going to happen next. The driver turns to the helper and says, spot me, right? What's spotter training like for you guys? Anyone? Yeah, okay. So here's how ours works. Here's our whole training. Will you spot for me? You say, yes, training's over, right? We're done. So the spotter jumps out and he walks underneath the awning. So he's got eyes on the driver and eyes on the hazard. Now, near as I can tell you guys, that's about as good as it gets in the spotter world, right? And he brings that truck in. Come on in. And they drive in there and they get to that awning and it fits. It fits perfectly. By golly, the signs do not lie. 12-foot truck, 12-foot clearance, probably a little fudge factor in both of those metrics. We're good to go. And because I don't know if you know the international laws of being a spotter, but rule number one is do not walk one step further than you have to, right? That's rule number one in the spotter community. I don't know if you guys hang out much in the spotter community, but that's what happens, right? When the truck lines up with the spotter, what's he do? Jumps in. And they drive that truck underneath that brand new, beautiful awning. And they hit the first sprinkler head, and then they hit the second sprinkler head, and then they hit the third sprinkler head, and because no job is worth doing partially, they got the last sprinkler head. And so at about 4 seconds, they knocked 4 brand new shiny sprinkler heads off on the bottom of the Hampton Inn awning. And I don't know if you've ever seen a sprinkler head knocked off, but it is relatively certain that you will have a boatload of water, a lot of water. And unfortunately for these guys, that fire suppression system was interlocked with the Brown Palace, and so when the sprinkler heads went off, it put the alarms off in that building and it dumped the entire building. So these poor guys are not only sitting in a truck it's a brand new 12-foot box washing station. I mean, now we use it to wash trucks, right? Not only are they busted, but they're really busted. Because every leader has to walk out those doors and walk by that truck. There is no question what happened. And I'm in Amsterdam giving a speech. I don't know how much time you guys have spent in Amsterdam, but you're about one brownie away from having a good day anywhere you go in that town. And my cell phone rings a whole bunch of times. Now, you can get away first couple times acting like you don't notice it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't notice you called. I'm sorry. But about the 5th time, I'm thinking, something must be going on. So I pick up the phone, and it's my boss, and he says, we had another event with an overhead hazard. And I said, what happened? And he said, we had a truck knock off 4 sprinkler heads in front of the administration, because people who sit in that building call it the administration building, in front of the mill. And I said, the Brown Palace, don't say it happened. And they said it did. And I said, what'd you do? And they said, we terminated the driver, we terminated the spotter, and we terminated the supervisor that runs that warehouse. And I said, well, that doesn't feel like the right thing to do. And they said, well, we had to. And I said, well, why'd you have to? Who told you have to? And they said, well, we made a decision. And we think that clearly communicates the seriousness of not hitting things with the top of your truck. And so I said, well, now give me a moment. Let me look something up. And then I acted like I was looking something up. I really wouldn't, but I act like I was. And I come back and I say, I just ran a LexisNexis on this, and in the history of mankind, no one has ever knocked a sprinkler head off with a 12-foot box truck on purpose. This is a mistake, and if you punish mistakes, you're going to really impact our culture. And they said, no, if we don't punish this mistake, we haven't sent out a loud and clear signal that we're serious about people not hitting crap at the top of their truck. And you guys have learned over time, right? when you're no longer welcome as a contributor in a meeting? You've learned that? Yeah? I mean, the more you work, you sort of learn how to read the tea leaves on that. I really realized at that point, I was no longer an important part of that conference call because they hung up on me. Which is fine, because I'm one brownie away from being skinny and beautiful. You know what I mean? That's story 2. Let me tell you story 3. Oh, God, stop! Stop! Let me tell you story 3, because this is the one I want to tell. I'm dying to tell you story 3. Okay, story 3, this is the story that brings it home. Exactly 1 week later. So the following Monday, I'm back from Amsterdam, looking good, feeling good. A truck leaves a furniture supply warehouse in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it leaves at 3:30 in the morning. I'm fully aware for you guys that the day's already about 30 minutes over by 3:30, but that's pretty early for the rest of the world. And they take off really early because they got to drive 100 miles, so they drive 100 miles, and they get to Los Alamos, where they've got to take that truck through the exploding truck inspection area, which means dogs will sniff it, and police guys will climb on it, and they'll run a mirror with wheels on the bottom, and they'll poke everything to make sure that truck doesn't have anything bad on it. And then once it clears that, they can go through the exploding truck inspection area. Then the guys in the truck have to go through a clearance process to get on the site, and they do all that stuff. And believe it or not, you guys, they finally get access into our facility at 8:45. So they're really about 4 hours into this process on what would normally be about an hour and a half drive. And they drive to where their job ticket says they need to deliver their furniture. They've got some file cabinets in the back of this truck. And the job ticket says they need to take these file cabinets to the Brown Palace. So they swing around to the Brown Palace, but it's the weirdest thing, you guys. It seems the week before there was a water main break, and they replaced the water main, but today's the day they're going to put the new asphalt in the back parking lot, so the back parking lot is closed, so the back dock is closed. And the guys think, well, you know, this isn't the end of the world. We got up really early. We'll just swing around to the front of the building. So they drive down to the side of the Brown Palace, and then they turn, and they're heading for this beautiful Hampton Inn awning with 4 golden sprinkler heads shining in the sun. And they see a sign that says 12-foot clearance, and they know they're in a 12-foot box truck, and they say, spot for me, and the guy jumps out, and he says, come on in, and they pull in. And when the truck lines up perfectly, it's fitting nicely. When the guy jumps in and boom, 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 they hit all 4 sprinkler heads. The exact same event happened 7 days later. Exact same event 7 days later. And I'm sitting in my office looking good, and the phone rings. And it's my friend Colleen Lopez. I call her CeeLo, and she is the director of Los Alamos' administrative person. And CeeLo says, Todd, the director would like to see you at 2:30 today. And I said, tell him I'm busy. And she says, well, that's not how it works. And I said, well, that's how it worked when he hung the phone up on me last week. And she said, you need to be here, and if not, we'll send someone to get you, but he wants to see you at 2:30. So at 2:30, I go to the principal's office, and I sit in that little waiting room outside of the boss's office. And if you get called to the principal's office at Los Alamos, for God's sakes, bring your own magazine. Because the only thing to read there is like a 10-year-old copy of Physics Today, and that actually makes the Lancet look interesting. So this is pretty awful, right? And about 2:30 comes and goes, 2:45 comes and goes, about 10 till 3, he opens the door and he says, Todd, you're here. Thanks for coming. And I said, no problem. And he said, come on in, I want to talk to you. And as I walk into his office, something weird happens. He turns and shuts the door behind us. And I think, I don't think that's that good of a sign. You know what I mean? Right? And so we walk over towards his desk, and he says, let's not sit at the desk. Let's sit over here on the couch. Now, I don't know if your boss has a couch in their office, but if they do, you've learned really quickly that the couch is not where the good conversations happen. The couch is where the bad conversations happen, but the weird thing about the couch is you got 2 guys on a couch. I don't know if you thought about this very much, but that's socially awkward because you sit down and you're like, what are we doing with our legs? Are we crossing our legs? Are we not? How are we looking at each other? Am I looking over my shoulder? Am I turning my brain? And the whole thing's real tense. And I realized this isn't going to be this interesting of a meeting, you know? It doesn't feel like it's going to be right. And then he starts to talk to me, but before he does anything, he puts his hands like this. And I think, oh my goodness, he's starting with a prayer. And I kind of feel like this could be my last day. This is it. I wondered how it would end. I thought the nudity would get me, but it's going to be these sprinkler heads. And he looks at me and he says, Todd, I just have one question for you. And I said, yes, like that, because I'm pretty nervous. And he says, did you pay those furniture guys to knock those sprinkler heads off? Swear to God. I should have invited him, actually. This is the best story. And I looked at him in the eye and I said, no, sir, but only because I didn't think of it. And then he says something to me that made me actually feel really good. And this is what I saw happen yesterday when Duke got up and talked to us. And this is what I'm seeing happening in the way you guys manage safety. He says this. He said, we've drifted to a place where we started asking the wrong questions. And one of the challenges I want to give you in this room is that the change you're on now in really managing reliability, because that's what we're managing, this change is yours. Because how we choose to react to an event colors how Quanta solves the problem. And if we see the problem as bad guy doing a bad thing in a bad place, I can guarantee you that we've punished the person, but we've not fixed the problem. And the reason I can guarantee you that is because we bought 8 sprinkler heads in 2 weeks, right? And I promise you, we left all the components necessary for that failure to happen in that system. And so Charlie, he's a really fancy, he's an MIT physicist, Nobel Prize. He's really a smart guy. He says, what should we do with this problem? And I said, well, the first thing I think I'd do is bring everybody back and make them whole. Let's bring them back and say, we reacted in a way where our assumption is you're hitting stuff with the truck because you don't care. When in reality, what we ought to do is look at the overall bigger system. And he looks at me and he says, bring them back. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, can we do that? And I said, I don't know. You're the boss. If we can, it seems like we're all screwed, sort of. You're the guy that makes that decision. And we brought him back and we put together a team of drivers. Not supervisors, not managers, not leaders, not planners, drivers. And we said, what's up? And they said, you guys have a problem because you've dutifully marked everything with these numbers. The problem is anybody who drives for a living, and you're in this room this morning, you learned a long time ago that those clearance numbers are always wrong. They said, if you don't want box trucks in front of the Brown Palace, you know what your sign ought to say? No box trucks. And what's interesting is that ability to tap into those workers and ask them how to solve the problem, engage the smartest people we have in our facility in driving. We brought the best drivers into the room and we said, how can we be better? And what's amazing, you guys, is we thought we were going to sit down and solve this awning problem in front of the Brown Palace. What we ended up solving was snow removal machines in our parking garages, which actually is a much more significant problem, and we learned dramatic amount of information in that moment. The power you have in this room is not in having the answer. I'll just be really honest with you. We're all super great people. We're good looking. We're younger than we should be. We're fun at parties. We got it going on. There's no question. Other people want to be us. Okay, let's just say that. But we're not that smart. We'll never be that smart. What's funny is the people who understand how your work is done, the world's experts in knowing how work is done, they already work for you. They're there every single day, and they can tell you where your system is robust and resilient and effective. They can also tell you where your system sucks. And that knowledge is there simply for the asking. But to get there, I think I owe you kind of something that Matt talked about, and it's this. I think we have to talk about the journey, because the one thing I want to challenge you in this room on is this line. This line is a rock star story of success. In fact, I'll just say this to you guys. You do high-risk work all over the world in every type of condition. And what's amazing about that is you do it extremely well. In fact, you're mostly successful. In fact, I'd suggest your failures are a teeny, teeny, teeny subset of what's actually a giant data set of normal work. Now, that's going to be important for us because we should talk about how this happened. Because believe it or not, you guys, this is a classic example of a good problem to have. But it's a problem. Now, what happens is over time, your safety has become really, really, really stable. And the problem with stable safety is that the data set you use to manage high-risk work becomes really, really small and not very predictive. So honestly, for you guys in this room, I can just say this because you'll get this. 15 years ago, if you had 6 hand cuts, you had a hand safety problem and you rolled out a hand safety program. Now, you live in a world where you won't have 6 hand cuts in probably 3 years. And because the data is no longer predictive, the challenge is, what do we manage? And I'll just be really honest and tell you that in the old days, we waited for failure to learn what to fix. The problem you have now is that you can't wait for failure because it hardly ever happens, and when it does, it's completely anomalous. And how you got there is exactly what Matt said. In fact, I'd suggest, we were talking in the back of the room, I'd suggest Matt did a better job than I'm going to do, right? But that's his whole job, so he needed to kind of step up to the plate because he's been phoning it in for years, right? He stepped up to the plate. It starts with this notion of compliance. And Matt gave you a really good history on compliance. I'm going to tell you 2 things about compliance that I think Matt didn't say, but are really important for you to hear. One is that compliance management means you're managing one worker at a time. And the problem you guys have in Quanta, and it's sort of built into the work you do, is that there are not enough of you in this room to manage every worker in compliance. You cannot be in enough places at once to intervene individually on every single worker that breaks a rule. But that actually isn't the part that I think is interesting. What I think is interesting about compliance is that it's the foundation upon which everything is built, but it's limited. And the problem with compliance is this. Ready for this? More rules do not equate into more safety. More rules simply equate into more rules. And more rules do not make you better. In fact, in your world, I would suggest more rules is probably a much larger risk than less rules. Think about that. That's really important. Compliance did its job, though. And when we put compliance into the system, look at what changed. Your performance got better. And then we started looking at really industrial safety. We started looking at safety and saying, we can actually manage safety systemically. We can look at and design systems that are better than systems we haven't designed before. And we got better again. But now we're sort of in this weird curve. Now, if you've got a background in process improvement, you know what this curve is called. It's a curve that goes dramatically down and then levels out. It never hits 0. And it's really a fun word to say because it sounds super dirty and kind of insulting, but it's just math. So you can actually say this in church. You can say it at your nephew's wedding. I mean, this is an appropriate word, but it sounds dangerous. You know what you call a curve that goes dramatically down like that and then levels out? Say it. Don't be shy. Asymptotic. Doesn't that sound dirty, kind of? Like if you're pumping gas and somebody next to you goes like this, asymptote. What are you going to say? I think I'd blow him a kiss. Because it's clearly an engineer, and that would completely freak out an engineer. I mean, they won't have any skills at all, that man, right? An asymptotic curve is really important. And if you think about this, what an asymptotic curve tells you is that your current process is saturated. So I'm going to say something to you guys that you really need to hear. And that is, if you continue to do the same thing, you're not going to get any different results. You can do it harder, You can do it louder, right? But it's not going to give you much more benefit. Now, that said, what you've done is super important. It's not wrong. Compliance really matters. Industrial safety, behavioral identification, all the stuff that Matt talked about, those are the things that got you to this asymptotic curve. But they're not going to be the things that get you out of it. And so the challenge you're on, because you truly are the biggest company nobody knows, and you have 40,000 plus employees all over the world, mostly working in small teams doing high-risk work, the challenge you have is that now you're in a place where you got to figure out how to manage this differently. And what's exciting about you guys, and it really is true, is that you're super agile, you're super courageous, and you're not afraid to take the lead. You will be the company that changes safety in your industry. I'm convinced of it. And the reason you are is because of this next block. You're now starting to look at the place where people meet the work. Because compliance focuses on people, and industrial safety focuses on the system. I would actually suggest that's not where your failures happen. It happens at the place where the people meet the system. 12-foot box truck, 12-foot clearance. You see that place? That's where we expect workers to adaptively problem solve in the field and create success. And mostly what they do is create success. But we're not done. And the reason I bet you see me again someday is because pretty much my entire life is about this. The reason I will tell you I will watch videos of people who an AED machine saved their life all day long is because this sign back here that says capacity model could not be better illustrated than having an AED on a truck. The reason they didn't die is because somebody somewhere said, it's probably worth it to put this on the truck. We may never use it. I hope we never have to get this out. But if we do, if somebody has a sudden cardiac event, we're going to have enough capacity in the system so that even the neighbor can benefit from Quanta's notion of capacity. Think about that. And that's an amazing part of what happens. Because what scares me more than anything is the fact that really, really safe organizations that are fixated on sort of managing those low-level numbers, those organizations kill people. In fact, I'll just say something to you. The reason there's a little tiny bit of conflict between Duke and I on this, I would say a gentle notion of, I would say normal Duke conflict, if you know what I'm talking about, right? Is because what scares me more than anything is the belief that when you're managing the low events, you're also managing the high events. I'm going to say something to you that I said to you last year, but I bet you didn't remember it. But I want you to sort of mark this down. Get one of those tiny Sharpies that are over there in the vendor area. Those are the cutest little Sharpies ever. And write this backwards on your forehead so when you look in the mirror, it says it, right? The things that hurt people in your business are not the same things that kill people in your business. And not every hazard is the same. I follow around a lot of people who do your work. Very few people who put pipelines in the earth die of ankle sprains. It's pretty rare, right? The things we need to really focus on are the things that make the biggest difference. And fatalities for us don't live in your high-risk, off-normal, storm response kind of work. Because we're super heightened at that point, and we manage and plan and build capacity. Fatalities live in normal. In fact, what I think about all the time is what scares me more than anything is not getting the guy on top of a pole working a line. What scares me more than anything is getting him across the parking lot in the yard where the trucks are parked. Because that's the crap you do in order to do work, but that's not even really hitting the radar screen as work. And so our challenge today, and it's a challenge you're going to hear a lot because my buddy Bob's going to come up and talk to you as well, is that we're going to say you have to understand normal work. And when we say you have to understand normal work, what we're saying is you got to look at work that doesn't fail and ask some questions. That's a big part of what we want to talk about. In fact, if I were to summarize this, it would look like this. Quanta as an organization is on a journey. And you're moving from traditional safety to this new understanding of safety. And if you look at the comparisons in this room, you guys are feeling this because you're living it. And the old view is really simple to explain. Traditional safety says workers are the problem, and so in order to make safety better, we ask workers to care more and try harder and don't hit crap at the top of their truck. And because we're constraining workers, we tell workers what to do or what not to do. We measure safety by the absence of injury. And so now in the old view, that zero becomes super attractive because if you've got 0 injuries, that means you got 100% safe. Except there is not a soul in this room who would believe that. And the differences between these two words. When you do high-risk work in the middle of nowhere with bees and snakes that ride, or bees that ride on snakes can't ride on bees. I mean, that would be my definition of hell right there. There's a bee coming at us, and it's got a snake on it. I'd just die right there, right? When that happens, when you do normal work, the question you want to ask yourself is this: were we good or were we lucky? Right? And either data set for you guys in this room is okay. If we're good, then that tells us we've got some processes in the system that keep us reliable. If we're lucky, that tells us we got some places where we can grow and get better. That sort of takes us to this new view. And what's changing, although for you guys, I'd actually suggest this change is easy, is what's changing in the industry is the way we look at workers. Where once we thought the way we make safety better is we make workers safer, now what we're realizing is the way we make safety better is what we really focus on, is the workers aren't the problem, they're actually the solution. You will not get better without engaging workers to help you solve this problem. I just promise you, you won't. And because they're a solution, let's not constrain them. Let's not tell them what to do or what not to do. Let's actually ask them what they need to be successful, and let's measure safety by the presence of capacity. 25 people didn't die because somebody somewhere said, these AEDs make a lot of sense. Let's put a bunch of them out in our vehicles. You can measure how many AEDs you got. What's amazing is it's really normally difficult to measure how many people didn't die. You're in luck. Because what's interesting is the difference between when Matt made that video and when we had that presentation, near as I could tell, I'm no whiz at this, is Matt said 22 people and the slide said 25. That's a capacity that works in between the time you make the video for this meeting and actually have this meeting. Think about that, because that's enormously powerful. In fact, for you guys, I've sort of added, these are secret information. Do not blab this out. Normal people don't get this. I've sort of added one other thing. What you've done on the journey so far is you've really tried to prevent things from going wrong. Now you're in a position where you're really pretty good at making sure things don't go wrong. Now what you got to do is ensure things go right. That's an enormously important part of where we go. So where does this take us? Well, it takes us right here. This is how your workers work. Workers are as safe as they need to be without being overly safe in order to be productive. What do you think about that line? So let me give you a quick example, because I think it's worth talking about. So the other day, I had to fly to Minneapolis. Have you guys ever flown there? So I don't get Minneapolis. There's like 2 airports, and there's 2 cities. One's like the Humphrey terminal, and one's not the Humphrey terminal. And anyway, I got there, and the rental car I had reserved was in the other terminal. So it's kind of like I flew to Minneapolis, but I had to pick the car up in St. Paul, right? It's the weirdest thing. And I'm like, but it's just one. I mean, the ticket is, and they said, sorry, you're at the wrong airport. So I have to get on a van to get on another van to get a rental car. And so I pick up the rental car, which, you know, I'm relatively good at. You guys in this room are ninjas. You're expert. But I'm pretty good. I get in the car, and everything's going well, and I'm driving out, and everything's perfect until we get to that little ticket booth where they ask you, do you have enough gas? Do you need a map? You know that one? What they're really doing is keeping you from stealing the car. And there was a 2.5-hour wait to get the car out of the rental car garage. Now, that's 2.5 hours of your life you're not getting back. And rental car garages aren't that sexy. You know what I mean? I mean, there's not like a bar in the rental car garage, although write that down. That's a really good idea. We could make some money in Minneapolis, right? So pretty soon I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? And I noticed there's just rocket ship fast Wi-Fi in this stupid parking garage. So I got 2.5 hours to kill, so I open up my computer and I start watching YouTube, because you can kill a lot of time watching YouTube videos. I'm serious, there's a lot of stuff on there that's worth watching. And I watched something that I bet a bunch of you saw. This is just a couple months ago. They had a high-speed camera set up in College Station where they took a picture of a guy running hurdles, jumping over the finish line. Did you guys see this? It was in super slow motion. So this athlete at Texas, he jumps over the finish line, and he's like a gazelle. He jumps probably 7 feet into the ground, above the ground, and he crosses the finish line. And I thought, that's what I should talk about when I talk about this slide. How does a hurdler jump a hurdle? So this is your part. Do I need to get my guitar out? Because I will. Is there a guitar back there? One leg at a time is good. 2 leg at a time would be a more interesting race. That's good. How does a hurdler jump a hurdle? So let me ask this. If they're going to show a high-speed camera video of a guy jumping 7 feet in the air at the end of a race, why doesn't the hurdler, is it hurdler? That feels wrong. Hurdlist? Hurdler. Athlete. Let's go with athlete. Why didn't the athlete jump way over the top of the hurdle? Yeah, because it impacts efficiency, right? So how does a hurdler jump a hurdle? Just clear. In fact, just enough. In fact, they want to get as close as they can to the hurdle without hitting the hurdle to be efficient. Now, I would suggest, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, I would suggest that's a pretty good illustration of what works like. Because it doesn't really pay to be overly safe, right? Because once you're safe, you're safe. Have you thought about this? So Matt had a slide that said it's sort of, the problem with being wrong is that until you know you're wrong, it feels like you're right. The problem with being safe is that if you feel like you're safe, there's no need to be safer. And what happens is your guys don't have the benefit of the hurdles all perfectly in a line on the ground. Your guys' hurdles are randomly spaced, and they come in every different direction. And they're constantly dodging those hurdles, but it doesn't pay to dodge them too far, because too far takes away that process. In fact, I'll tell you there's 2 things we should talk about in this room. And there are 2 things I want you to think about all day long. Number 1 is the belief that somehow in your business hazards are permanent is just wrong. Your guys encounter hazards that nobody imagined would be there, and they do it all the time. And number 2, which is really important, is the belief that every day is the same. Because in your world, nothing's ever the same. In fact, in your world, if tomorrow looks like today, you suck at what you're doing, right? I mean, your job is to make progress happen and move forward. What amazes me is your workers are really, really, really good at being as safe as they need to be without being overly safe in order to be efficient until they're not. And that's what we should talk about. But to get there, I want to tell you that our work's not inherently safe. Your people make the work effective. Your people make the work productive. Your people make the work reliable. Which takes us ultimately to this, risk. So I want to take a couple seconds right at your table, and I want you to discuss this. Here's the question. It's the most important question I'm going to ask you today, and it's the question that I think sets the tone. It's this one. What's happening when nothing bad's happening? But to get you in the headspace to really look at this, I want to show you this really, really quick video, okay? Now, the thing about this video, freaked me out there for a minute, is that this video just gets more and more interesting. So I'm going to shut it off a bit, because I really am going to come to you and ask you the question about what's happening when nothing bad's happening. But if you think your job sucks, you could be this guy. I like his whistling. Yeah, so this video just gets better. That's Steve. If there's ever a place to have an AED just pre-hooked up, this seems like the, you know what I mean? Just kind of carry it with a remote. Do you need to see more of this? Let's go to this question. Ready? Whoops, let me go backwards if I can. What's happening when nothing bad's happening? At your table, take 2 seconds to talk about that. I'm going to come to ask you what this means. So 2 things about this. Before we go on, let me just ask you. Number one, I'm really serious when I say this to you. I actually think for you guys, this question may be the most important question I can give you. Because this question is really interesting because there's 2 potential responses that you probably talked about in this room. One is that when nothing bad is happening, we get complacent, which is true. Complacency is a function of a stable system. The less things go wrong, the more comfortable you are with high-risk operations. I would suggest, I'm a psychologist, so I'm a little biased, that you actually want people who are comfortable managing risk, because I'm going to tell you something that's really important. You don't manage risk. You know this, right? In fact, what scares me is this idea that if nothing bad is happening, risk must be reduced. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The other way you can look at this is you can say this. When nothing bad's happening, it's because a lot of people and a lot of processes and a lot of systems are functioning exactly the way we designed them to function. The scariest thing you can carry out of here is the belief that somehow an absence of events means a decrease in risk. In your world, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but in your world, I do not see a scenario where risk will decrease. I just don't. In fact, I'm seeing a scenario where risk for you guys operationally is increasing. We spent 45 minutes yesterday talking about cell phones and an app that shuts them off. What we're addressing is this notion of risk. What you manage is not risk. What you manage are controls. And when nothing bad's happening, the reason nothing bad's happening is because all the training and all the education and all the mentoring and all the procedures and the rules and the regulations and the equipment and the systems and the supervision and the leadership that Quanta provides globally are aligning in such a way that we can do high-risk work successfully. Now, this is important because your job is to not wait for failure to solve problems. In this room, I'm surrounded by people who are fixated on what will fail next. And the way we determine what will fail next is not by the presence of risk. Risk is normal. It's the absence of capacity. I want you to look at your systems and ask this question. Where don't I have sufficient capacity? Because that question, that's the question that makes all the difference in the world. Think of it like this. You got the black line, right? Matt talked about this. This is the drive, although any drive reference in Houston to me is just evil, but we'll go with it, right? Right? That's normal work. This is actual work. And your guys spend as much time overperforming your systems as they do underperforming your systems, but what your guys really manage are variability. We don't pay people to follow procedures. We don't. We pay people to manage variability around those procedures. And that's what your guys do all day long. So let's take it one step further and let's draw it this way. Let's make it fail, so it's going to go down below. But let's add to this something that we talked about just a moment ago, and that's hazard. So now we have the black line, which is normal work, the blue line, which is in fact how work actually happens, and then the red line, which are the hazards your guys encompass. And we know if the blue line hits the red line, that's an accident, right? What we've traditionally paid attention to is this gap. But here's what I'm going to tell you. I think this gap is important, but really normal. What gap do I care about? There's only one left. Yeah, I feel like you'll get this. I mean, right? I'm confident in you. That's actually where your work lives. That's the gap you manage. So when we say today, you've got to understand normal work, what we're telling you is what you've got to be able to give me is the blue line. Because the blue line tells me where the workers really are. And then what I want you to do is look carefully at the gap between the blue line and the red line. That message, although it sounds kind of theoretical, is exactly what is the next step for you guys. Because if you ask me, how do I apply this crap in real life? And I've spent my entire career applying this crap in real life. The first thing I'm going to tell you is you need to tell me what normal looks like. Because if you can't talk about normal, then you can't talk about the hazard, And that means you don't understand the capacity. If you assume the world is on the black line, it scares me. One more quick story, and then I'm out of time. But this one is the one I've been fixated on all summer. This year, 38 little kids died from heat exhaustion because their parents left them in the backseat of the vehicle. And about a month ago, a young man, 31 years old, in the Bronx in New York City, was taking his 3 children to work on a Monday. His wife was on travel. And he always takes the toddler, the 4-year-old, he always takes her to daycare. What was different today is he had the 2 1-year-old twins in the car as well. And normally his wife takes care of the twins. Seems like a good distribution of power if you ask me. And so he goes on that Monday because he's got a presentation that day. He's a mental health nurse working in a mental health hospital. So already I think he's an amazing person because that's an amazing job. And he drops off the 3-year-old at daycare because that is his practice. And then he's thinking about his presentation and he hits the road and he kind of goes to autopilot and he drives to his parking place in the Bronx and he jumps out and he prepares to give his presentation. And at the end of the day, he comes out and finds his 2 1-year-old children dead. We arrested that man. What'd we fix? I can't think of a worse punishment than killing your children. What scares me is we responded to that event as if it were the black line. But it's not the black line. It's the story of the wife on travel and off routine and a presentation and Monday morning. That's the story. We will not fix this problem by saying parents who leave their children in hot cars are bad. They're not. They're busy. They got lots going on. We'll fix this problem by building a system. And Tesla this year put a software update in their vehicles. Do you know about this? It's called pet mode. Can anyone tell me about pet mode? So pet mode, if it senses something in the vehicle that's alive, it turns the air conditioning on and will not allow the temperature to go above 73 degrees, and then it calls the owner of the car and tells them that the car has moved into pet mode. They didn't build this for pets. The lawyers said it needs to be pet mode because it's pretty easy to defend pet mode. They built it for kids. I'll make you a promise. Little kids won't die in Teslas because the car won't let them. But that's not all they changed. If you don't know about Tesla, I'm going to make it a really attractive car. They also put in what's called an Easter egg, a fun little benefit that came with the pet mode. And that is they built something they call the whoopee cushion. Do you know about this? There are 8 farts you can choose from, each one getting more and more realistic. And you can assign them to an individual seat in the vehicle, and then you can assign any switch on the dashboard so that it actually makes the farting noise. The last time I went to Tesla, I got in the car, and the lady said to me that was picking me up, sit in the back. And I said, well, but there's only 2 of us, and the front is right here. And she said, well, there's not enough room in the front. And I said, well, there's not enough room in the back. Look at me, right? I'm going to have to fold. And she goes, well, just sit in the back. And I said, but I want to sit there. She goes, just sit in the back. So I sit in the back, and then she started making me fart. And I said, I'm an expert in this. I mean, I bring a lot of perfection to the system. I don't really need your help. That notion is the notion we want to talk about. That's really where I want you to be in this conversation. When something happens, not if, when it happens, I want you to ask this question. Did the worker fail, or did we put a worker in a position where there wasn't enough capacity? One last story, and then I'm out of time. I would suggest the journey you're on, this journey into new safety, is something that you do all the time. And I would suggest that this journey is one that you can practice in all sorts of situations that may have less potential consequence, but you can actually get some time underneath it. One of the things I want to invite you to do is run an experiment. The next time you go to the grocery store and you get a cart full like that, I don't know if you noticed that cart this morning in the leadership moment, did you? I mean, that was interesting because I looked at a cart and there were actually vegetables on the top. That would not be my cart. Cookies would be on the top of the cart. One would be kind of open, and I'd have to say, these were open. I don't know who did this, right? The next time you go to a grocery store, buy all the stuff and then go to a real check stand, not one of those automated ones, but a real check stand, and put all your food on that conveyor belt and have them check it out. And then what I want you to do to sort of understand this notion of this new view is I want you to end the last thing you put on that conveyor belt, end your purchases with toilet paper, okay? And when the checker scans all the stuff and gets to the last item, the toilet paper, I want you to look the checker in the eye and I want you to ask this question. Is that enough toilet paper for the amount of food I bought? That, my friend, is capacity. Thanks for your time, you guys.